I would like to begin by thanking you all on behalf of the Muslim Student Association for attending tonight's event. I'd like to start off by asking everyone a few questions, and I know they're a little bizarre, but bear with me, I have a point to make. How many people here would go to their lawyer for a medical prescription? Anybody? Okay, good. Or how many people here would consult their hairstylist about tax deductions? Finally, how many people here would go to a ticket officer for marriage counseling? Somebody? Okay. So I know my examples seem a little far-fetched, but the point I'm trying to make is this. Sometimes we rely on a source, while in itself may be knowledgeable, isn't the best source for the information we seek. As a result, that information is undependable and can oftentimes paint a picture that portrays a misconception or misrepresentation. And this is exactly similar to accepting what the media has to say about Islam. A Muslim scholar, Mustafa Zaid, wrote in his book entitled The Lies About Muhammad that ultimately the media's interpretation of Islam is similar to this analogy. Shaquille O'Neal is a short, poor, white man. The reason the MSA decided to host this specific event is really in response to the media's fallacies. As I'm sure most of you are aware of the various recent events relating to Islam, such as the Park 51 Mosque and the Burn the Quran Day. Today's event and our guest speaker is by no means here to take a defensive position, simply because when one is certain of one's position, one not need defend it. However, what we hope to do is to clarify the misconceptions and paint you a more accurate picture of the reality we like to call Islam. Whether you choose to take down that old painting and replace it with what is said here tonight is a personal choice. But as with anything in life, one must always know both sides of any story. So without further ado, I would like to introduce President Dugan to say a few words of wisdom. Please enjoy your night.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know about the words of wisdom, but I'm here anyway. First, I'd like to welcome all of you to this very important evening. It is a tradition in the Franciscan spirit to welcome newcomers in particular. So those of you who are not part of our everyday community, we especially wish you a warm welcome, hope you are comfortable here, and hope you enjoy this program. I would like to welcome and thank Brother Mazen in particular for being with us to share some real words of wisdom. I'd also like to thank our Chancellor, Dr. Macchiarola, for being amongst us. I know you will enjoy hearing from him. So welcome everyone, and please enjoy St. Francis College while you're here and the hospitality that we attempt to provide. I want to congratulate the Muslim Student Association for organizing not only this, but for organizing itself in the style and the fashion that has produced some of the events that they have run. I can recall an interfaith dialogue earlier in the year and now tonight, and I know I was inspired to in fact be here tonight, even though I do have another appointment to go and do something, because I was visited by Sarah and Soha this week, and when they explained what they were doing and the context in which they were doing it, I said, well, I just have to come and listen to as much as I can, but certainly to lend my face and my support to what you're doing and will continue to do, I'm sure. It seems to me that the goals and thrust of the Muslim Student Association is so apropos and so timely that we all need to pay attention and to learn and to absorb information, because many of us are either, as was suggested earlier, either ill-informed or uninformed with respect to a tradition and culture which is rich and historic and deep, and about which, frankly, most Americans know very little. The idea of this sort of activity as a complement to what goes on in the classroom is embedded deeply in our Franciscan Catholic tradition. And rather than try and perhaps use 1,000 words to describe how deep that tradition is and how important it is, i.e. setting up a dialogue, a conversation, such as the one that we're going to have tonight. I don't know how it came to me, but I will tell you honestly, I was sitting at my table saying, there's an event tonight and I'm going to have to say a few words, and what is it I should say? And on my table were really three things: the invitation, a copy of the Quran, which was recently given to me and to the college by an Islamic organization, and a flyer which otherwise I would have perceived as junk mail that had arrived today. And in contemplating what I might say, my eyes went to the junk mail. And I looked at it, and what it was a pamphlet published by the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities in the U.S. with a couple of other participant organizations similar in nature to that organization. And what the pamphlet had was it was a description of 8 principles of higher education, goals and standards for higher education, and in particular Catholic tradition, colleges and universities. And I took a quick look at the 8th principle, and the third one was that our goal as an institution of higher learning, and one developed in the Catholic and Franciscan tradition, was that we should strive to enrich student integration of faith and reason through the provision of co-curricular activities and opportunities. And what is more perfect than bringing together what you're doing tonight with what this organization, was founded to do and has done faithfully for 150 years. And I've been associated with it for 46 years at this point, and really more than that. But I can assure you that what is being organized by our students is what we strive so hard to do and to create. To go a little further, and forgive me because I won't be quoting exactly, but I will be relying heavily on phraseology and words that were in this pamphlet. This is how that principle is fleshed out. The Catholic tradition has always valued and engaged in dialogue about the interconnection and integration of faith and reason. This dialogue and integration is a legitimate and significant part of higher education. Institutions such as St. Francis College foster the development of the whole person. In addition to rigorous intellectual development, there is particular emphasis on a student's faith and spiritual development. Catholic colleges and universities provide opportunities for students to develop a habit of reflection and to value prayer in bringing both faith and reason to the discernment process of how to live out their learning experiences. We also provide opportunities for intellectually informed and robust conversation on important issues of faith and culture. It seemed to me how perfect and how much we owe a debt of gratitude to the students who organized this and some of the other agendas that they have organized. So I'm here to say welcome, and I'm here to say thank you and congratulations to the Muslim Student Association. I hope you have a terrific evening.
Thank you, President Dugan, for those remarks. My name is Hussein. I'm also part of the Muslim Student Association. Up next is Dr. Makirola, who's Chancellor of St. Francis College and who has also helped us greatly in putting this event together. So if you would please applaud Dr. Makirola.
First of all, I'd like to give my thanks to the President for his support of this tonight, which is a wonderful opportunity for the students to, as the President indicated, come together about a theme that is so central and so important to our mission. I'd like to express my thanks to the Muslim Student Association. Sometimes what happens is when you put a bit of sand in the wrong spot, it causes an irritation, and somehow this presentation has grown out of an irritation, which is absolutely perfect. That's what should happen in the growth of ideas. My welcome, hearty welcome to our guest, to Imam, for what I know will be a wonderful presentation. He is not without a reputation, and so it will be a wonderful evening. I thought tonight what I would do to just at least talk a little bit about the background is to emphasize a few fundamental truths that I think are at the core of any dialogue that we would have. And the first of this is that the three faiths of Abraham, are all connected through what is described as a covenant or as a pact or as a treaty, essentially a relationship between man and God. And when I say man, I mean man and woman and God. And that reciprocity is central to our understanding of what life is about. We understand that as people of God, we have a responsibility to God. And that responsibility is matched by God's responsibility or God's treatment of us. It's a two-way street. It's reciprocal. And each of our faiths have elements of that. And so they are united in a common understanding of the very basic nature of what we are as people of God. And that holds true no matter what our religious belief is. In fact, that is a core that not only unites us, but unites all right-thinking people whose knowledge of God may not be as developed, may not be as understanding, but nonetheless feel the bask in the glory of God's goodness extended to us. And so with that common understanding, we begin to talk about more than just our differences. Our differences, in fact, melt away. Because the world is divided between believers and non-believers. And that fundamental difference is more significant than the differences that exist among believers. Because it is the non-believer who challenges all of the responsibilities we have to one another, who engage in things that are selfish, who take for themselves rather than give for themselves. They are people who do not understand the meaning of a relationship with God, which is something we all do. Now, the theme for today's symposium is around terror. And the question we have to ask is, those who are engaged in terror, however we describe it and see it, are they following God's will? Is that what God has in store for us? Is that faithful to God's word? And I think among the believers, those of us who engage in the world and understand the needs of other people and one another cannot countenance terror as coming within that scope. And so it's a question of how do we address it? How do we face it? And let me tell you, there are people that expect of us that we see terror in their terms. And that's something that we cannot do. I can only see it in my terms. I cannot see it and make political statements about it. Because the world in which we all live, the political world in which we all live, is very different. And the definition of what's politically correct and not politically correct is not the major issue. The major issue is our own fidelity to that. Now, the Muslim community is not apart from the dialogue. As the President said, he indicated in the remarks that he gave. For Catholic Christians, it is an incredible responsibility that we have to promote dialogue. And for those of us who run Catholic colleges, it is. This is not something that Muslims find strange. This is something that's part of the Muslim tradition. And in effect, if you look at the recent documents, if you go back to 2007, you go to the Jordanian conference that Muslim scholars and clerics and leaders held, you will find they talk about the need for dialogue and the meaning of dialogue and intergroup relationships. It is clear, and it's their topic, a common world between us and you. An outreach to the non-Muslim community, extending a hand of friendship and extending dialogue as a response. This fact gets lost when people make assumptions about things they do not understand. But it is not lost among those people who love their faith, understand their faith, and understand the responsibility that's imparted to them to represent that faith. Now, I will tell you, as former president, as chancellor of the school, I have the opportunity to see the students, the Muslim students in this college, perform their responsibility and perform it admirably. It is a dialogue they are engaged in with one another and with all of us that involves their hard work, involves their scholarship, involves their participation in the life of the school, involves the excellence that they practice. It is for me an honor to be part of a community that has this type of student involvement. And so tonight we're going to see an extension of the 2007 conference, in fact the 2009 conference of Muslim leaders that was in Egypt and was welcomed across the world. We're not talking about something that isn't universally understood by the Muslim leaders and scholars, religious imams and others who practice their religion and want their religion to show light to the world. It goes back to what I said before. We are children of God, all of us. We share in God's love. We bask in the glory of that love. And if we can extend that to others, if we can by our own action extend that love, that we're fulfilling God's word. And so even though today is not a worship ceremony, it is very much an event blessed by God. So I would like to again welcome Imam. Thank you all for coming. Tell you I look forward to what's always good about the Muslim Students Association is also that not only do you have food for thought, but we get real food. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Makirola. Next up, our speaker for the night is Brother Imam Mazen Mokhtar, who is a member of the New Jersey chapter of the Muslim American Society. He is also on the board of trustees. Brother Mazen has a BSc in computer science. He owns and runs his computer consulting business. He also holds lectures at Masjid Al-Huda in New Brunswick, as well as the Institute of Islamic Studies. He also gives lectures on the history and activism of Islam and the exegesis of the Quran. So if you would please applaud Brother Mazen. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. I thank God for bringing us together to share thought, share ideas. I would like to thank President Dugan and Chancellor Macarola. Did I say it right? I'm glad that I did. So I'm sorry if I didn't get it exactly right. But I thank you for your kind words. And today I plan to share some ideas about terrorism, which is a timely subject at this time because of, not only because of events that are happening, but because it is the subject that is discussed very often. It's now on people's minds. It is a prime subject of debate. It is a prime subject in the news. And for me to begin to discuss a subject like this, I want to begin first of all with a foundation. Instead of just speaking haphazardly, I want to lay out certain principles from which I'm going to proceed. I want to tell you, by the way, that during the words that we're sharing, anytime you wish to speak, just raise your hand. I'm going to give priority to your question over my words, so you don't have to wait until I'm done. And every now and then, I'm going to ask you some questions too. Okay, but feel free to raise your hand anytime. So the principles from which I want to proceed when discussing this subject begin with what are the purposes or the objectives of Islam. And the objectives of Islam that are relevant to us today include that, in fact, it is a guidance from the Creator leading us toward Him, which is to say, toward righteousness. We uphold certain values as fundamental values, not values that are subject to circumstance. They are applicable based on circumstance. But the value itself, these are higher values. Among these values is the value of beneficence. Means being good in yourself and being good toward others. Among these values, we have the value of justice. The firm belief that justice is a higher value. And that we should uphold this. Defend not only our own rights, but the rights of others as well. Defend justice when applied to people, but defend justice in principle as well. And among the values that we uphold is this idea of seeking the truth, looking for the truth wherever it may be, and following it wherever we find it, whether it happens to be convenient and familiar, or inconvenient and unfamiliar and contrary to our perceptions. Among our values is the value of righteousness, to look for the right way and to pursue it, with the same ardor with which we pursue our personal interests. In other words, we believe that righteousness is a personal interest, even though it may not seem so. So there are many definitions of wisdom, but one of the definitions of wisdom is the knowledge and the certainty that what is right is in my personal interest, and to pursue it as such. When I don't see that what is right is in my personal interest, then there is a veil between what I should do and what I want to do. And when I say, in my personal interest, I don't mean to say that righteousness will feed me in the same way that a piece of steak will. As a matter of fact, the path of righteousness may include a lot of hunger. What it will mean, though, that it will achieve my purpose, my true interest. I was not created for the piece of steak. So I should not define myself in terms of the piece of steak. The piece of steak was made for me. So it defines itself in terms of me, so to speak. Instead, I am created for a higher purpose than to eat, than to drink, than to sleep, and to have chats and have fun and laugh. I am created to achieve something greater than that. That which leads me to my real purpose, the purpose of my creation, is in my personal interest. And if part of my purpose, part of the reason for which I was created, is to seek justice and righteousness for myself and for others, then whatever it is that leads me there is in my personal interest. When I tell my son not to steal, even though he's going to make a bundle, and it's going to be very hard to replace, I am actually looking for his interest, not only the interest of society, but his personal interest in being an honest person. So having laid this foundation, I want to mention one issue before defining terror for the purpose of this. Having laid this foundation, one of the things in which we really firmly believe as Muslims, and I believe that Franciscans will accept it wholeheartedly is this concept of brotherhood, not only the brotherhood of people within one community or one nationality, but the brotherhood of all of mankind. To quote the messenger, Muhammad, may God's blessings and peace be upon all the messengers of God, he said, you all belong to Adam, and Adam is from dust. So there is a tie that binds all of us together. Other than the fact that we happen to come from the same country, or have the same skin color, or we speak the same language. As a matter of fact, some of these secondary considerations are so weak that we should strive to eliminate their undue influence on our lives, such as the color of our skin. And some merit some value, but it's not the highest value, such as, for example, belong to the same family. There is great value in that, but it's not the highest value. So we understand that we are part of one large community. And when we look at each other, we shouldn't look at each other as almost, a different type of creature, but we should see each other as people who can cooperate for the better good. Now, unfortunately, there is no exact legal definition of terrorism. I have my theory on why. But if I'm going to discuss it, at least I'm going to give you a definition of terrorism. And hopefully a useful one that you will find easy to accept, easy to embrace. There's only one troubling thing about the definition I'm going to give you. Okay? So once I give you the definition, I'll tell you what the troubling thing is. Terrorism, for the purpose of the words that I'm sharing here today, is the use of force against innocent people. And parenthetically, with the intent to cause intimidation or fear. I put this parenthetically because the intent is not always very clear. Sometimes people do things against others, and the greater picture has been lost. They get so lost in little twists of thought that they lose sight of what it is that they're trying to do or what they're trying to achieve. So I put it parenthetically, but it is part of the definition. So the use of violence against innocent people. By this definition, the unintentional killing of innocent people is not terrorism. And by this definition, if a person were to have the death penalty, whether you approve the death penalty or not, just for the purpose of this definition, that would not count as terrorism. And as abhorrent as war is, if a person is killed in battle while fighting for the purpose of this definition, that would not count as terrorism. That would not make it more justified. It's just not the definition that we're using here today. I also wish to give a definition for jihad, because it is a word by interesting twists of fate has been confused. Jihad is the exertion of one's effort, applying to three broad levels. Exertion of one's effort against one's own weakness, exertion of one's effort toward the public good, and exertion of one's effort in war. These are three broad areas that apply to jihad. All three are used in the Quran, by the way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Allah, God, Arabic word for God. Arab Christians call God, Allah. If you open an Arabic Bible, from the first page, you will see the word Allah written in it in many places. Okay, I think I counted like 8 or 9 places on the first page. Okay, so it's just a word that means exactly what you think of as God. So God writes in the Quran about the Quran that use it, the Quran, for jihad and engage in a great jihad by use of this book. Obviously, what he's saying is not, take the volume and throw it at somebody's head. But what he's saying and what he means here is that there is wisdom in it. And wisdom is very powerful. You can actually win a person's heart through a good argument and through good treatment. You can change how a person feels with a good word. So that in itself is a form of jihad. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam means, it's a phrase meaning, may God's blessings and peace be upon him, and applies to all the messengers of God, from Noah down to Abraham, to all the messengers of God. The messenger said, I have tried the sword and I have tried kindness. And I have found kindness to be sharper, or more cutting, to use an exact translation. More effective. The third word I want to define, because it's also used in the Quran, is the word people think of when they think of jihad. The meaning that people think of when they think of jihad, but they don't know the word, which is qital. Qital is specifically fighting, waging war. There is a place for each of those in life, for a Muslim and a non-Muslim. We believe that all people have a right to human dignity. And this is a higher value. That's what I meant when I was talking about justice before. The difference between human dignity and justice is that the value of human dignity is wider than the value of justice. The value of justice is in giving me what is due, and in everything being in its proper place. The value of human dignity, though, is that I intrinsically, I meaning any one of us, not me personally, that I intrinsically have value, and promoting the value of the individual, promoting the interests of the individual, is in itself a form of promoting human dignity. Which means that we believe that one of the reasons why we are here and one of the values we uphold is that as an individual, I have the right to my life, to my safety and security. I have the right to think, to grow, to learn. I have the right to my property, not to be taken away from me by a thief or by assault. I have a right to my honor, that a person should not accuse me without right, without proof, even if they're right. But a person should not accuse me without proof. I have a right to my family. What I mean by this is not that I own them, but what I mean by this, I have a right to know who my father is, who my mother is. I have rights toward my parents, and they have rights toward me. I also have duties toward my parents, and my parents have duties toward me. So we believe in an actual value for family. And we believe these objectives are the higher objectives known as maqasid al-sharia, or the objectives of sharia. I mentioned them, but I left one out. I have a right to my conscience, my faith. I have that right. People discuss sometimes this issue of a person accepting or being forced. And I want to clarify the issue of a person accepting Islam by force. The Quran says, it's in chapter 2, it's in verse 256, if you want to read from there down, 255, 256, and 257, you will see right in the middle of that, the context is important, that's why I mentioned the 3 verses. You will see that it says, there is no compulsion in religion. Truth has been made clear from falsehood. So therefore, the use of violence in order to induce a person to accept the faith is unacceptable. But it's worse than that. Actually, it's counterproductive. As Muslims, we classify those who call themselves Muslim into 2 broad categories. Okay? In reality, people don't fall in neat categories. It's a continuum. You have a person who is sincere, and you have a person who is a hypocrite. A person who is a hypocrite is a person who professes to say something or do something, but doesn't actually believe. And in faith is a person who claims to be a Muslim, but actually isn't. And by Muslim definition, a hypocrite is at a lower level than an idol worshiper. Okay? It is further away from the guidance of Islam to be a hypocrite than to be an idol worshiper. At least an idol worshiper, you know where he stands. But a hypocrite says one thing but does another. If I were to compel somebody to become Muslim, instead of turning them from whatever faith they had into a Muslim, I'm turning them from whatever faith they have into a hypocrite. In other words, I'm taking them a step back, not a step forward. Much, much better off for everybody involved to stay as they are and for nobody to be compelled. Now, in modern times, the issue of terror has arisen. And what I want to share with you is a principled position. It is not a reactionary position. And it is not a position of convenience, and it is not a circumstantial position. So it's a position for our times. But what I want to share with you is a principled position. I've defined terror before. So it's the use of violence against innocent people to induce intimidation or fear. As Muslims, we believe firmly, as a matter of principle, that innocent people must not be transgressed upon, whoever the innocent people are, and whoever transgresses is wrong and unjust, whoever the transgressor is, Muslim or non-Muslim. And I apply this rule equally to those who are conveniently called terrorists and to those who are conveniently excluded. To those who are conveniently identified, when I say convenient, I don't mean that they don't deserve it. I'm saying that by convenience, people identify them as such. Those who are identified as victims and those who are neglected and forgotten as victims. So whether people find it easy or convenient or popular to call someone a victim or not, or to call someone a terrorist or not, what matters to me if a person is perpetrating violence against innocent people or not. That is the only thing that matters. To illustrate this, I want to share two stories. One of them about the value of human life. One time there was a funeral procession that passed by the messenger when he was alive. A funeral procession passed by. At that time, there were hostilities in Medina between the Muslims of Medina and the Jews of Medina. The messenger stood up. So they told him, no, he's basically from your enemy tribe. Okay? He's from the other guy. So imagine, we're going back to the 80s, he's a Russian. Okay? So the companions told him, it's the funeral of so-and-so, he's a Jew. He says, is it not a soul? You see, while he was alive, he may or may not have been an enemy. But now that he's dead, the only thing that remains is the value of his soul. And it does not matter beyond that. The other story is much, much more clear on the position of terror in Islam. After one of the battles in which one of the tribes attacked the Muslims. The Muslims won. And after the battle, the messenger, may God's blessings and peace be upon him, walked on the battlefield and he saw a dead woman on the battlefield from the enemy. Now, she is from the enemy. She's on the battlefield. She's not on the side of the battlefield. And it is well known among the Arabs is that women used to go out with the army as nurses and as support. So they would encourage their husbands, but also they would take care of them. If anybody's injured, they would help them. So clearly, her utmost role on this battlefield would be the equivalent of the Red Cross, as a nurse. And when the messenger saw her dead on the battlefield, he frowned and was visibly upset. And he said, why was this woman killed? She would not have been fighting. Had it been a tribe that had women fighters, the Amazons, okay? This is mythical, of course. So had she been an Amazon warrior, it would be a different story. But it was just a woman on the battlefield. Now notice this. She is from the enemy. She came out with the army. She is participating in the army, but she's not fighting. So he was visibly upset. Which means that regardless of any justification that anyone may have to fly a plane into a building, whatever plane for whatever building or whatever country, even if the building is on a battlefield, you can't do it. Unless it's a military building, that's another story. You see? There is a war between two armies and there's a military building, you attack a building, that's fine. Whether it's fine or not depends on the merit of whatever you're doing in the war. But it's not inherently evil. But you have a building full of innocent people. If it were on a battlefield, it would not be acceptable. What about traveling overseas to look for people and to destroy them? This is doubly unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. Now, as the introduction said, I have not come here to apologize. That act has nothing to do with Islam any more than a rapist who happens to be Christian speaks for Christians and defends himself by argument of Jesus. You know, Satan was too strong in me. I couldn't resist him. That's fine. Argue away. It doesn't make your act any more Christian. It doesn't make you more justified. Now, I said that I apply the standard equally. And I want to share with you a provocative thought. Admittedly, one aspect of the thought I'm about to share is exaggerated to provoke, but to provoke thought. So it's an idea to provoke an idea. But think through with me. When I look at the world scene today, I don't find a world in which terror by Muslims is an essential problem at the same level as terror by non-Muslims. What I mean to say is this. Instead of being surprised as how many terrorist attacks there are by Muslims, I'm surprised how few there are. I mean, imagine now with me, and I admit I'm just doing this as an exercise, okay? So I'm not arguing this in all sincerity, but just think with me. Imagine if somebody came to this land, New York, took it over, kicked about 3/4 of the people of New York out, killed approximately 15% of everybody in New York. And whoever remained from the people here, whoever remained, were put in enclosures so that basically Brooklyn Heights, you basically had an enclosure on about 17 blocks, another enclosure about 20 blocks. And because the hospital is in the other enclosure, you can't actually go to the hospital before going through 3 checkpoints. Now, I want to ask you, would you agree with me that it is inevitable? We're not placing value whether it's right or wrong. That it is inevitable that some people from the good people of New York will turn to terror? Absolutely. It is inevitable. Now, would it justify a wrong act? Now, let's say a crazy person from New York went ahead and killed an innocent person. I can understand what he did without justifying it, correct? So if he were to kill one innocent person, it would not be acceptable. But at least I can understand why. So now, to extend my thought, I see acts, and sometimes cynically, I define terror as violence by Muslims. Because it seems whenever anybody else does it, it doesn't count as terror. So let me share some statistics with you. Europol, which is like Interpol, shares statistics about terrorist acts in Europe in 2006. In 2006, they had 498 terrorist attempts, successful or failed. By Muslims, 1. 2007, they had 583. By Muslims, 4. In 2008, they have 512. By Muslims, 0. I don't have statistics for 2009. And 2010 is not over yet. Overwhelmingly, by the way, this is by separatists, whether it's Corsican separatists for France or in Spain also you have separatists. That's the overwhelming amount of the attacks. Failed or successful, so the totals here is not successful attacks. Failed or successful. Now I look at these and I wonder, why is it that it is only terror by Muslims that is highlighted? And by thinking a little bit, I come to 2 conclusions. The first conclusion is a very happy one. It's a good thing that terror by Muslims is highlighted. Puts us in check. In other words, it makes us revise our assumptions. And it gives us doubled resolve within our community to stand up against terror. On the other hand, I cannot escape the fact that there is a camp of anti-Muslim bigotry out there that is stoking the fire of bigotry. I can mention names, individuals, specifics. I can mention news outlets that do this. But what matters to me here today is not the names and the specifics. What matters here to me today is that the majority of the people are going along not out of ill will or viciousness, because they don't know better, because of something wrong we as Muslims have done. Not terror, something else. We have not been sufficiently involved in the debate. I mean, you watch Fox News and it is amazing. The debate is between a liberal Christian and a conservative Jew, or a liberal Jewish person and a conservative atheist person about Muslim terror. So basically it's between a Muslim and a non-Muslim and a non-Muslim. Where is the Muslim voice? And there are Muslims who want to speak and they want to speak out. But a variety of factors get in the way. One of them is internal. We haven't developed the reach into the media that others have developed. Some of it is external. Some anti-Muslim bigots delight in the fact that they exclude Muslims from the debate. But I have to say that the overwhelming factor is that we have not done enough to be part of this debate. I have been living in the United States continuously since '85. I have been a citizen since '89. I have lived for periods of time in other countries, including Egypt, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, France. And I can attest, by personal experience, that Americans are among the most welcoming people, among the least xenophobic, hating people who are foreign, among the most embracing. This may be less so now than it was 10 years ago, but it is still very noticeable. And whenever it is that it decreases because people are whipped into a frenzy. The frenzy of terror. The frenzy of Mexicans who are taking our jobs. The frenzy of people who are going to increase the crime rate. People get taken with frenzies. And during one of those frenzies, they ignore the value of human life, human dignity, and instead they start being us and them. Let's protect us, because we're us. We're better. You know, the Quran refers to this and says, as a matter of warning, every community sees its deeds as best. So a person who's wearing an earring is saying, look at those savages wearing nose rings. It's the exact same thing. But because they're not used to nose rings, they're savages. But because we're used to earrings, oh, it's cute. It's so nice. It's a challenge for us to step away from this relativistic look at others. It really takes effort for me to notice the difference between a nose ring and an earring. Because the human mind works along channels. That's how we were created. It works by association. So you dig paths in your brain, and I'll give you an illustration. You hear somebody say an expression 15 times in response to a question, right? It becomes embedded. When you ask that question, I'm not saying you're going to give that answer. I'm saying the answer is going to pop in your mind. If you make no effort, you'll give that answer out. If I give you an association now, so I'm not going to play in the association game, but if I give you some of the reinforced associations, you will naturally think along the way most people think. That's not necessarily a bad thing as long as we are aware of the limitations of our mind and there are biases, that there are prejudgments in it. I once attended when I worked for AT&T, they had a multiculturalism course. And during one of the sessions, we had to write on one of those big boards associations, stereotypes with certain people, right? So one of the stereotypes, I remember it very, very clearly, that was written up, you know, Asian, slow driver. I had never heard it before. It had never occurred to me. I mean, I had heard before, you know, that old person slow driver. I heard before woman slow driver. I've heard these. I'm not approving any of those. I'm just telling you I've heard these before. I had never heard that association before. Now, I reacted to it. And I said at that point, I think this exercise is creating prejudices we didn't have. Now, wouldn't you have it? Wouldn't you know, 3 weeks later, I'm driving, okay, and there's somebody in front of me. And they're slow. I eventually overtake them. And I happen to glance. They were not Asian. But the idea popped in my mind. You know, as much as I hate it, the idea popped in my mind. I grew up from my background understanding that the use of violence is abhorrent. Okay? No, I'm not talking about the use of violence in war or terror, just the use of violence in general. Okay? With very, very limited exceptions. So I would accept that if your father tells you not to play with the matches and you keep on playing with the matches and there's a danger you're going to burn yourself in the house and he slaps you on the hand to teach you not to play with the matches, that would be acceptable. But beyond this, that's pretty much as far as my imagination can go in exceptions. Beyond this, I really, really found it abhorrent. It is only later in life that I developed this perception of an association between jihad and terror. I didn't grow up with it. But I tell you what, it's here now. I don't think I have the bias, but the perception is in my mind. So be careful of what you associate and how you associate things. Are we looking at the world fairly? Are we actually looking at the incidence of terror? So I want to ask you a question now. I really do not mean by this to make a particular political judgment on a particular force or act, even though I will be doing that. But I do mean to stand up for a principle. If I go to a country and I bomb every bridge, like every last bridge, in some of them people are walking around, would you count this as terrorism or not? You would count it as terrorism? Well, what if it's done by a military force, like an organized military force, an army? Would you count it as terrorism? Would you condemn it as vigorously as you would condemn the lone gunsman who walks into a school and shoots the people in the school? If it's a matter of principle, the answer should be yes. If it's a matter of convenience, the answer is, well, I have to think about this. Actually, thinking is good. So if your answer is, I have to think about this, that's not a bad answer. But the point is, don't get so swept by somebody else's judgment. We are a minority of people, and this is not self-congratulatory. Blah. We are a minority of people, and I do not speak for everybody here, okay? But I'm speaking at least for people who take moral principle as a higher principle. We are a minority of people who take moral principle as a guiding principle over my personal material interest. Most people speak the same language I spoke, but in practice, most people choose their own personal material interest first. So if I am privileged to be among a people of learning, students, hopefully people of principle, who believe in the value of moral principle, then please do not let somebody else make your moral judgment for you. Make your own moral judgment based on the right principle. When a Muslim walks into a school, shoots a child because his family was shot, it's still wrong. And when his family was shot, that was wrong too. If you condemn one and not the other, there is something wrong. If I create a war that destroys a country, according to, so let me see here. So I quote exactly. Opinion Research Business Poll, between 946,000 people and 1,120,000 people are killed in the country from 2001 to August 2007, then I have to be willing to condemn those deaths just as vigorously as I condemn the deaths that have been brought up in the media. So that brings me toward my conclusion. The most difficult part of this talk is for me to talk about analyzing the reasons for a bad act without justifying it. So let me now preface my following words by saying that what I am going to say right now does not justify any negative act. I don't say this as a disclaimer because I don't want to get in trouble. I say this as a matter of principle. If you want to oppose and to combat any evil, you need to understand what made it so. I really do believe that it is a worthwhile exercise for us to understand the rise of Germany between World War I and World War II, the rise of Stalin. What are the factors that led to it? What are the things that caused communism to be powerful for a period of time and then weak at another period of time? You can do it without placing a value judgment. Why is it that one people get killed by others? Why is it that we find mass graves with like 40 people with their hands bound, sometimes behind their backs, all buried in shallow graves? Why is it that people who happen to be Serbs killed a large number of people who happen to be Bosnian in Bosnia for a period of time? I don't have to justify what the Serbs have done, but I need to understand it if I want to prevent it. So Giuliani's explanation for the attack of September 11 is this: they hate us because they hate our freedoms and our democracy, which, if you think about it, is content-free. I mean, does this make any sense? So I don't like the fact that you have freedom and you have democracy, and that's the reason why I'm killing you? There's another explanation. The fact is, they told us exactly why they attacked us. They spelled it out. They gave us examples. They talked about the fact that they feel that their country is being invaded. In this case, Saudi Arabia, with foreign military forces. Now, I may approve or not approve, that's a bit different point. But I have to understand what motivates them. People talk about terrorists being motivated by poverty, being motivated by ignorance. Ignorance is not a motivator. Ignorance is a circumstance that allows a terrorist to become one. Poverty is not a motivator. Injustice is. Martin Luther King said, riots are the voice of the voiceless. I have the great fortune to live in a place where I can speak out. And because I live in a place where I can speak out without fear of intimidation, I don't even feel the need, or I don't have to combat like this innate animality inside me that's making me want to be violent. I don't feel the need to be violent. When I disapprove, I express myself. If I lived, on the other hand, in a place where I could not express myself, where I could not say no, and when I say no, I am hit over the head and told to shut up, don't speak up, then at that point, evil thoughts will start to develop. So I submit to you that there are things we can do materially, practically, that will reduce terror. Starting a war in the wrong place is not one of them. You guys know that in the history of Iraq, it has never happened in the history of Iraq ever. From the inception of the United States until today, that Iraq attacked the United States. There was one possible attempt on the life of the father of the president when he was visiting Kuwait, may or may not have been plotted. And now after the war, not before. So creating more violence is not a way to reduce violence. But among the ways to reduce violence is for us, first as nations, and then as communities, and then as individuals. For us as nations to understand that it is in the highest, the best interest of our people to thrive while others thrive, but not to thrive at the expense of the life of others in such a way that will provoke some crazy people to do something undisciplined. As communities, that is probably the best that we can contribute, because communities are very powerful. They change ideas, they change countries. As communities, for us to come together and engage in dialogue with the understanding that we are one and together, with the understanding that we are seeking some of the better things together. While we may differ in the way in which we worship, we may even differ in some of the values we uphold, we don't differ in the higher values. I doubt anyone here truly believes that justice is unimportant. I doubt anybody here really believes that human dignity is unimportant. As non-profit organizations, non-government organizations, as societies and communities, as churches and synagogues and mosques, as people coming together, meeting on weekends, it is worthwhile for us to deepen this understanding of the value of human life. Not my life or the life of my guy, but human life in general. It is worthwhile for us to learn to praise a good act no matter who does it, and to condemn a bad act no matter who does it. In other words, let us outgrow this idea of the good guys and the bad guys, and let us instead settle on the better ideas of what acts are beneficial, what acts are not. Then we can deduce from it who the good guys and the bad guys are. But at least let us start with principle. And as individuals, there is something great that we can do. 58% of Americans, according to a recent poll, do not know a single Muslim. So I'm using the Muslim example because it happens to be apropos, but the principle applies generally. To engage in dialogue, to speak to one another. You know, an open secret known to pretty much anybody who knows anything about the Muslim community is that the Muslim community is not sufficiently open to others. There is a reason for this, by the way. It's not just that we're all, self-involved or anything. It's as Muslims came to the United States, there was an instinct of self-preservation coming together. It didn't happen to Muslims only. It happened to most communities that came to the United States. Now that we are well established, we have our mosques, we have our community centers, we have grown to the point that you can't find a crowd without one Muslim or two in it. It is high time for us to engage and to open ourselves up to be engaged. You know, there's a hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which I'm going to translate very loosely because I don't want to quote the whole thing, I just want to get one point in it. The Messenger says, whoever considers doing something good and does it, gets a reward for it. Whoever considers doing something good but doesn't do it, gets a reward for that. Whoever considers doing something bad but doesn't do it, gets a reward for that. And whoever considers doing something bad but does it, gets a sin for that. In other words, consider more things, you'll be rewarded. The more you consider, the more you think about things, the more reward you will get. Franklin said, and the attribution to Franklin is not 100% certain, but it's very, very likely it was him. He said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And it is often misquoted as, those who would prefer their safety to their liberty deserve neither. I am afraid that our society has committed this sin. I am afraid that when I walk into the airport and I see the body scan machine, still optional, can submit to an intimate pat down instead. I worry. When we are at the point where you used to need a judge's order or judge's warrant in order to listen to a conversation. We are now at the age of every conversation is recorded. And after the fact, when they feel like it, they can analyze voices to decide where you spoke from any line. I'm afraid that we are losing some of what made this country great. I'm afraid that the terrorists are winning. Because theirs was not a battle over a building. If theirs is a battle over our soul, let us not be soldiers for them. Let us not empower them. Let us stick to our principles. Let us be better than them. Let us be better than them in our action, and let us be better than them in our reaction. So I will quote a little story here. One time in a battle between Muslims and Persians, a Muslim commander was handed on a plate the head of a Persian commander. As soon as he saw it, he recoiled in horror. What is this that you're doing? So they said, that's what they do to our commanders when they kill them. He says, now we're going to follow their example. So we should not be people who treat people based on their values. We should be people who treat people based on our values. And with this, we are mightier than they are. With this, we are stronger than they are, and we have a deeper effect than they do. I leave you with this thought. I talked about the value of human dignity, the value of an individual. I talked about the brotherhood of mankind. And I mentioned the hadith of the messenger where he said, all of you belong to Adam and Adam is from dust. I want to return to this. Adam is the father of all of us. We are quite literally cousins, not first cousins. Literally. Literally, you're my cousin. I just don't know in what way. And you're my cousin, and you're my cousin. And the people I like are my cousins. And the people I don't like are my cousins. If we started truly looking at each other as cousins who deserve the good treatment of a family member, then I believe that we will have made a huge leap forward. And until we do, we will continue to be stuck in this me and you, us and them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of us to guide us not only to do right by ourselves, but to spread the right guidance among those who are around us. With this I close, and in any remaining time I will be happy to take any questions or comments. So the Quran addresses the issue of war and the issue of fighting in several places. And the best way to understand the Quran is through the Quran. In other words, if you have a verse and you don't know what it means, read the verse before, or read the verse after, or read another verse that'll talk about the same thing. You can also see how the messenger understood and applied this verse. So that's what I'm going to do. The first place that God refers to fighting in the Quran, He says, fighting has been prescribed upon you, and perhaps you hate something and it is good for you, and perhaps you love something and it is bad for you, and God knows and you do not know. And it came in a particular context, because for a period of time, about 13 years, the Muslims were being physically oppressed in Mecca to the point that some were killed. Okay, so there's a famous family of Yasir who were slaughtered. The father and the mother, they were killed. And there are others as well. And for a while, the oppression kept on increasing and increasing and increasing. And then eventually, they left Mecca and they settled in Medina. And the attacks didn't stop. As a matter of fact, the hostilities didn't stop, not the attacks. The hostilities didn't stop because there was no harassment anymore. But the hostilities didn't stop, with sides preparing for war. So it's in that context that the verse was revealed. So to understand, well, what are the limits? Well, the Quran is very, very clear. Whoever uses aggression towards you, you may use aggressive force toward them in as much as they use aggressive force toward you. And in another verse, fight those who fight you, and do not transgress, for Allah does not love the transgressors. And the messenger himself applied it, because you said a very good point. He said, there is this perception out there that Muslims should go ahead and fight the non-Muslims. Well, let's see, is there a better standard bearer on understanding the Quran than the messenger who taught this Quran to mankind? Obviously not. So how did he himself understand this verse? Well, as it turns out, he lived in a community that was multi-religious, multicultural. When he arrived in Medina, he, as a matter of fact, drafted what's known as the Constitution of Medina. And the Constitution of Medina is a multi-religious, multicultural constitution for Medina, with a government, with separate communities. So in the United States, for example, and most Western democracies, they don't have this concept of multicultural democracy. Essentially what it is that you have, multi-communal democracy. You essentially have one community, one law for everybody, and if you like it, great. If you don't like it, no. Because of this, you have, for a period of time in Turkey, there was a struggle between the Turks and between Kurds who don't speak Turkish and other minorities. You have in France the Corsicans, who even now, some of them don't want to be French. Okay? Napoleon was from Corsica, by the way, and they're very proud of that. Because of the power, not because they approve of everything he did. And you have also in different places minorities who feel unexpressed. They don't feel that they can actually be a community by themselves. So the messenger instead, he had in Medina, where there were three Jewish tribes and two originally idol-worshipping tribes, he made them essentially into a community, each community runs its affairs according to its own law. Each of the two communities. And it's only when there is a problem between the two communities or judgment between them that the government gets involved. So in essence, they all get married in their way. They all inherit in their way, according to their own law. And throughout his time, he has given explicit instructions. The one I will pick out for the purpose of the answer to the question is, whoever is unjust toward a person of the book, Christian or Jew, living among Muslim lands, then I will be the advocate against him on the last day. So Muhammad himself will stand, he will argue for the Christian against you, against the Muslim, if they are unjust toward him. I pick it by way of example, not because it's exhaustive. And throughout his life, he has had in his life, he had neighbors, he had others who are non-Muslims. Does that answer your question? Very good. Next question. What I'm saying about ignorance is that in itself it doesn't motivate, it creates the opportunity. When a person is ignorant, it is easy to mislead them. So it creates opportunity. But a person doesn't attack another person because they're ignorant. But because they're ignorant, somebody could fool them into it. So we still need to ask, what is the motivator that motivates one person to attack another person, an innocent person? That's what I'm saying. And I identified some motivators without giving justification. So I said the sense of injustice, the feeling of being treated unjustly. You know, there's a story in a certain country. Okay, this is a true story. In a certain country a long time ago where they still had, tribes, it's like, the Hatfields and the McCoys in the United States, well, they had like fights between tribes and families. So there was an Egyptian Arabic language teacher who's teaching within one tribe. He's teaching Arabic. And he was killed by a person from that country, don't want to identify the country, from another tribe. The tribe that hosted him swore that they will kill, not the killer, an Egyptian Arabic language teacher who teaches at the other tribe, which makes no sense whatsoever. Eventually he wasn't killed because they made peace between the two families. But it was a big deal. They had to bring the tribal elders. They had to bring them together. And they had to basically, essentially accept that the blood will not be paid with blood. So this is crazy. If you kill my brother, doesn't mean I kill your brother. You kill my son, I kill your son. No. It doesn't work that way. However, if you aggress toward me, then I have the right to defend myself. But I do not have the right to transgress. And if you do horrible things to me, I may use whatever force necessary to protect myself, but I cannot do horrible things to you. Remember the verse I said, if a person aggresses toward you, you may aggress in similar measure, but not in a similar way. So if you torture me, I can't torture you. It's not something I do. So now, when we look at it, we should remember that a person is responsible for themselves. I will attempt to give brief answers, but this is not to reduce the value of the question, but it's only in the interest of time. In my mind, I believe that the two main causes, the two main reasons why people do not express outrage at some of the injustices that they see is, one, they tend to, with time, become desensitized, especially when you don't see it personally. So now you heard about the miners who were in the mine for a long time. If you didn't see the pictures, you forgot about them. If you saw the pictures, you didn't forget about them. You hear about a war, 10,000 people die. But see one picture at the front cover of Time magazine, it sticks with you. So to personalize it and to have a stake in it is important. So with time, we become desensitized. After a while, 10,000 is like 100,000, is like 500,000, like 1.1 million, which is a number that I quoted today. But people become desensitized. The other reason is, and I mean this in a nice way, I'm not putting us down, but there is a measure of intellectual laziness when you let somebody else think for you. And therefore you place value on what they place value on. What's at the top of the news? What's at the top of the news is whatever it is your news outlet chooses to put at the top of the news. That doesn't necessarily have to be what's at the top of your mind. So I remember there was an earthquake in Colombia back in maybe 86 or 87. I lived in Baltimore back then, and I saw the Baltimore Sun. Here's the headline. Team A beats Team B, huge score. It was like, I forget, it was Super Bowl or some I forget even the sport, but it's huge. The entire top half of the Baltimore Sun was about the game. Second half, one column, Colombian earthquake kills, I don't remember how many, but it was in the thousands. Now, clearly, the editors of the Baltimore Sun did not have the same priorities as I did. Now, I understand. I mean, sports sells. I understand people really want to know the results of the game, and they're not really involved in Colombia. But the fact that I understand why they did it doesn't mean it's right. Certainly not right for me. It is, if I were the editor, as a moral position, I wouldn't do it this way. So don't let somebody else think for you. Think instead of for yourself. There is a third factor at play here. The sense that, what can I do? I mean, come on. What can I do? There is nothing I can do. I mean, can you do anything about Ethiopia? Can you really do anything about the war in Palestine? Can you really do anything about the war in Afghanistan? The answer to every one of these questions is absolutely yes. But we think the answer is no. So we tend to justify our own comfort by saying, well, I can't do anything. But subhanAllah, if all you do is raise awareness in yourself and share it with a few other people, how much more do you want than that? I mean, there is more you could do, but this is an achievement in itself. To be sensitive to human suffering is worthwhile. In itself, it's a value in itself. It carries a reward in it. Now, you talked about terror, but you also talked about injustice. That is the greater thing, the greater concept. Terror is one special case of the greater concept of injustice. And I believe that people of moral integrity should, as a matter of principle, combat injustice in every one of its forms. Now, I may not see the injustice that you see. Maybe you lived in a place where your district did not benefit from tax dollars to create a decent school because everybody in your district happens to be from a certain racial background. And I happen to be from a different racial background. Okay, I happen to be white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. Not that there is anything wrong with that. Okay, but let's say I happen to be that, and I happen to be from a happy neighborhood, a rich neighborhood, and I get the best schools, and I don't even realize that you're going through this trouble. So part of it is not me being oblivious to your troubles. So your job is to point out to me some of what you're suffering from. If there is something good in my heart, you will be touching it.
Think so?
Yes, I think so. I actually believe that that is a moral test. I think for people to be exposed to injustice is a moral test. Now, I cannot react to every injustice, nor should I. You know, I cannot react to every single injustice in every single place. What I should do is prioritize. But I need to be sensitive to every injustice. I believe that people of moral integrity will react positively. In the beginning, people of moral integrity, they might be skeptical. They might not know. They might be argumentative. That's okay. You know, be forbearing with them. Hear them out. Show them the evidence. But once the truth of the injustice is shown, I think they will react. They may or may not be able to help, but I think they will react.
What happens when they are devoid of moral integrity?
It is the job of those who have moral integrity to advocate moral integrity. And it is a continuing battle. From Adam and his sons, one killing the other, until the last day, between those who have moral integrity and those who combat moral integrity, and between them, people whose moral integrity can stand being stronger, which is the majority of people. So if you are a person of moral principle, I believe you should advocate moral principle. That is a much more worthwhile fight than my God can beat up your God. Those petty, meaningless wars about my particular way and your particular way. I think it's worthwhile for us to discuss these issues, but not to fight over them. But to fight over morality, to fight over justice, to fight for justice. That is a worthwhile fight. And we will find a lot of people who are not of our faith, and some people who do not subscribe to any faith, who will stand up, because the belief in morality is not just an intellectual belief. There is something decent inside our hearts. I believe that every heart has a seed of good and a seed of evil. Every heart. And you act on that heart to grow the seed of good so much that it stifles the seed of evil, or you indulge yourself to the point that the seed of evil stifles the seed of good. But I believe that there is good in the heart of everyone. And I believe you can grow it. You can help them find that seed and grow it, even if they're far off. Malcolm X is an example. I mean, he was a pimp at one point. And a thief. Jihad, first let me define it. It is the exertion of effort to achieve something worthwhile. And it falls in three major categories. The bottom line is the jihad, if it is for a just cause, whether it is jihad against my own weakness, which is one kind, or jihad for the establishment of justice and righteousness and to further higher values in the people around me, or military jihad in the cases that it is valid, it is strongly upheld by Islam as a high moral act, not as a moral value, but a moral act. And to explain the difference between the two, the Messenger said, do not desire to meet the enemy. But if you do, then stand firm. There are two cases when Muslims can engage in military jihad. Military jihad is military war. Okay, so whatever applies here applies there. One case is for the defense of myself, my country, my property, my people. In the second case, for the standing up for justice or the defense of another. These are the two cases. It's not only in self-defense. So if you're being attacked and I come to your aid, then any exertion of effort I put is in the way of God. Any expenses I go through, I get injured, for example. I got injured in the way of God. God Himself will compensate me for that injury because I came to your aid. If on the other hand, if I am aggressing, then it is all on me, and I will be held accountable to any harm I inflicted on you, in addition to the fact that I have willed aggression against you. But jihad is a very high act in the appropriate time. So basically, if your country is attacked, you don't stand up to defend your country, this is Islamically not acceptable. If you can and you don't. I think one of the most effective one way to combat false associations is to identify that they're false. But a more effective way to combat false association is to replace them with more accurate and better associations. So I think there is a huge tradition that we can tap into that really gives depth to the history of Islam and Muslims. Thank you very much. There is certainly a decline in certain war-torn regions, such as Iraq, and there are also some other places which are war-torn. But rest assured that the Christian community in many places in the Arab world, such as Egypt, is alive and well and in the millions. So I don't think within a generation it's going to vanish or anything. But there are factors. You brought governments in Islamic countries that are following the teachings. Let me stop you right there. Okay? So I haven't come here to praise or oppose governments. Even when I used examples from the American foreign policy, my point was a principal point. It was not really to support or oppose Bush or to support or oppose Obama. Okay? And I fully admit that the real situation is much more complex than I presented it. However, I think the trouble with many of the Arab countries is that we don't have exactly what you described. Governments that follow teachings that value multiculturalism. Instead, you find that governments, in a lot of places, that shall remain unnamed, much, much more interested, not in promoting Islam or Muslims or Christianity or Christians, but instead in promoting the interests of the ruling elite. It's never a person, by the way. It's always, you're shown like there's this one guy, he's the big guy, and there is not a single Arab country where the head honcho is just one guy. It's always an elite. An elite keeping one guy, either as a figurehead or as a real power, but an elite behind that person. And they want to further their interests. And you will find that in the same countries that Muslims are oppressed as well. Not the same way. So in some countries, Christians are oppressed more, in some countries, Muslims are oppressed more. But you will find generally this low-intensity war between the governments and the people. And that is generally an overall judgment on most of the Arab countries. A very sad judgment, but this is the reality that is happening. You can see it when once in a while they allow for a fair election. Then you can detect who the real powers are, who the people really support. Having said that, I also want to mention something about some of the Christian minorities. Christian minorities have lived in the Muslim world forever, since there was such a thing as a Muslim world. And they have thrived in the Muslim world since forever. The Palestinian Christians today suffer just as much as the Muslim Christians. And they have trouble just as much as the Muslim Christians. Muslim Palestinians. Yeah. Don't worry. I make these mistakes often. So the Christian Palestinians suffer just as much, and they share in the burden. The longest treaty in human history that continues to exist was a treaty between Muslims and Christians in Palestine, and there was a second treaty that lasted nearly as long between Egyptians and southern Egyptians who are of their various beliefs that lasted for like 900 years or something like that. So the Omari Treaty exists until today, even though there is no power of law to enforce it. And that essentially makes peace between the Muslims and the Christians in Palestine. So they have thrived for a very long time. Muslims do not take the attitude, so I'm going to act or to speak out in opposition to a sentence I agree with. The sentence is, all men are created equal. I agree with it before I say anything against it. Okay? But actually, in reality, people are not created equal. People are created morally equal. You're born, you have the same moral worth or value as another person who's born. But we differ among each other in worldly ways. In other words, one person is taller than another. One person speaks a language another doesn't speak. You have talents another person doesn't have. You have aptitudes that other people don't have. You might find poetry easy, somebody else find math easy. And I believe that we can make a real change in ourselves first and those around us. Thank you very much.